Tom was a quiet cowboy who lived on the edge of a small desert town. He had a small ranch with open fields, wooden fences, and a weathered barn that held years of stories. People in town knew Tom as the man who worked hard, spoke gently, and cared for every animal that crossed his land. He lived a simple life and never looked for trouble. He believed that kindness could change the hardest of days. Every month the town held an animal auction. Most ranchers came to buy horses or cattle. Some came only to watch. Tom did not need more animals, but he still visited the auction each time. He said it was good to look around and see if any creature needed help. He believed every life had value. One warm afternoon Tom rode his old truck to the auction yard. Dust rose as people moved from one pen to another. Horses neighed in the distance. Sellers talked loudly about strong hooves and good breeds. Tom walked through the yard with calm steps. He looked at each animal with careful eyes. Some were young. Some were tired. Some looked hopeful as if waiting for a new start. Near the far corner of the yard Tom heard angry voices. A small crowd had gathered around a metal cage. Tom walked closer and saw a thin brown dog curled inside. The dog had sharp eyes and a lowered head. Its tail stayed still. Its ears twitched with fear every time someone shouted. People kept shaking their heads and stepping back. One man said the dog barked at everyone. Another claimed it growled when he tried to touch it. Someone else said the dog was too wild and no one should take it home. They called it the most hated dog in the entire auction. Every time the auctioneer tried to start the bidding, people only laughed or refused to raise a hand. Tom kept watching the dog. He saw fear but also something else. The dog looked tired, as if it had spent many days waiting for someone to understand it. Tom had seen the same look in other animals that had been pushed from place to place. He knew that anger was sometimes only fear that had grown too strong. The auctioneer raised his voice again. He tried to call for bids but no one responded. People started walking away. The sun grew hotter and the crowd scattered. The dog pressed itself into the corner of the cage, as if trying to disappear from the noise and the stares. Its eyes looked up for a moment and met Tom's gaze. Something in that look stayed with Tom. He felt a soft pull in his heart. He walked up to the auctioneer and asked about the dog. The man shrugged and said the dog had been returned by 3 different owners. He said the dog refused to obey commands. He said the dog barked at shadows and chased anyone who came near. The auctioneer said he would have to send the dog away if no one placed a bid. Tom looked at the dog again. He saw the way its paws trembled. He saw the way it avoided people but still watched everything with careful attention. He felt the urge to help. He believed no creature should be left behind because of fear or misunderstanding. Tom lifted his hand and placed the first bid. The auctioneer stared at him with surprise. People turned around to see who had done it. A few whispered that Tom had made a mistake. Others said he was wasting his money. No one else placed a bid. Tom won the dog without a challenge. The cage door opened slowly. The dog stepped back with a low growl. Tom stayed calm. He knelt on the ground and placed his hand flat so the dog could smell it. The rancher waited patiently. After a long moment, the dog moved forward with small steps. It sniffed his hand once more. Tom did not rush. He let the dog decide the pace. The dog finally walked out of the cage with its head low. Its ribs showed slightly under its thin fur. Tom whispered soft words and clipped a rope leash gently around its neck. The dog did not pull away. It only watched him with confused eyes as if trying to understand why someone had chosen it. Tom led the dog to his truck and lifted it carefully onto the seat. The dog sat still, alert but not angry. As Tom drove toward his ranch, the desert wind blew warm air through the windows. The dog looked outside with a calmer gaze than before. Tom kept glancing over and saw that its breathing slowed little by little. When they reached the ranch, Tom opened the gate and guided the truck inside. Horses grazed in the distance. The barn door creaked softly in the breeze. The dog stepped out of the truck with unsure steps. It looked around and sniffed the ground. Tom let the dog explore while he filled a bowl with clean water. The dog approached slowly and drank with quiet eagerness. Tom set up a soft blanket inside the barn for the dog to rest on. He chose a corner where the dog could see everything but still feel safe. The dog curled up on the blanket and closed its eyes. For the first time that day, Tom saw peace on its face. He sat down nearby and watched the dog sleep. He wondered what the dog had gone through. He wondered why people had given up on it. He felt a strong sense of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He promised himself that he would give this dog a chance no one else had given. Tom did not know what challenges awaited him. He did not know the secrets hidden in the dog's past. But he knew he had made the right choice. The ranch was a place where broken things learned to heal. Tom hoped the dog would find comfort there. As the sun set behind the hills, Tom walked out of the barn and looked at the sky filled with warm colors. He felt a gentle calm inside him. He did not realize that the dog he had brought home would soon change more than just one ranch. It would change lives in ways no one could have guessed. The next morning Tom woke before sunrise as he always did. Soft light touched the edges of the sky while the ranch rested in the quiet of early dawn. He stepped out of his small wooden house and took a deep breath of the cool morning air. Birds began their gentle calls from the trees near the barn. This was the hour Tom liked most. It felt peaceful and full of promise. He walked toward the barn to check on the new dog. He did not know its name. The auction papers only said male dog with brown coat. Tom wondered what name would suit a dog with eyes full of caution and a heart that seemed tired. He pushed open the barn door quietly so he would not startle the animal. The dog lifted its head from the blanket when Tom entered. Its ears perked, and its eyes followed his every move. There was no growl this time. No shaking paws. Just alert curiosity. Tom smiled softly and sat down a few steps away. He placed a bowl of fresh water and another bowl filled with warm food he had prepared from simple ingredients. The dog hesitated, watching Tom first, then moved closer and began to eat. Tom stayed still and let the dog take its time. He knew trust was not something that came quickly. He needed patience and calm actions. When the dog finished eating, it sat down in front of him. Tom held out his hand again, open and gentle. The dog leaned forward and sniffed his hand with more confidence than the day before. Tom spoke in a warm and steady voice. He talked about the chores he needed to do and the fields he had to check. He talked about the horses that lived on the ranch and how the mornings were usually busy. The dog listened as if trying to understand every word. Tom thought it was time to give the dog a name. He looked at the dog for a long moment. The brown coat reminded him of the soft earth after rain. The eyes held depth like an old trail that had seen many steps. He said the name Rust. It felt simple, steady, and fitting. The dog blinked once as if accepting the sound. Tom repeated it. Rust. The dog's tail gave a tiny movement. Tom stood and walked toward the open fields. Rust followed with slow steps. The morning sun grew brighter and cast long shadows across the ground. Tom checked the fences while Rust sniffed every corner. The dog stayed close but never too close. It looked back often, making sure Tom was still near. Tom found this small habit endearing. When Tom reached the pasture, the horses lifted their heads. They watched Rust with careful eyes. Rust stopped and lowered his head, showing he meant no challenge. Tom knelt beside him and touched his shoulder lightly. He praised Rust for his calm behavior. The dog relaxed a little more. As the morning passed, Tom worked on cleaning stalls and preparing feed. Rust stayed near the barn door, observing each task. Sometimes he stepped forward to sniff a tool or a bundle of hay. Tom let him learn everything at his own pace. Every now and then Rust would glance at Tom with a growing softness in his expression. It was small but meaningful. Later that afternoon, Tom took a break under the old oak tree near the barn. He sat on the ground and rested his back against the trunk. Rust approached slowly and lay down a short distance away. The breeze carried warm air across the fields and birds circled lazily above. Tom felt thankful for moments like this. He decided it was the right time to try something new. Tom picked up a simple rope toy he had braided from old strands. He tossed it gently a few steps away. Rust watched it fall but did not move. Tom picked it up again, tossed it a little farther, and waited. Rust looked at Tom as if trying to read his intention. Then, with surprising speed, Rust ran toward the rope, picked it up, and returned halfway before stopping. He dropped the toy and looked at Tom again. Tom praised him with a calm, cheerful tone. Rust wagged his tail a bit more this time. The movement was small but full of progress. As the days passed, Rust became more comfortable on the ranch. He followed Tom from sunrise to sunset. He watched him fix fences, gather hay, repair tools, and feed the animals. Rust learned the sound of Tom's whistle and the rhythm of his footsteps. Tom learned Rust's habits as well. He noticed how Rust preferred quiet spaces and gentle voices. He noticed how Rust slept lightly and always faced the door as if keeping watch. One evening a group of ranch hands from the nearby town came to visit. They often shared stories or exchanged tools with Tom. They brought supplies and news from the market. When they stepped onto the ranch, Rust tensed and stood near Tom. His body stiffened, but he did not bark. One of the men, named Sam, looked at Rust and let out a low surprised whistle. He said he had seen that same dog at the auction. He said the dog had chased a few people who tried to touch him. The others nodded and said they never thought the dog would find a new home. Tom explained that Rust was doing well and learning slowly. He said Rust needed time and gentle handling. The men watched Rust sit beside Tom with calm eyes. One of them said the dog looked different now. They admitted they had judged him too quickly. Tom smiled and placed a hand on Rust's back. He said every creature deserved patience. After the men left, Tom walked Rust toward the barn. The sky was painted with soft colors as the sun dipped behind the hills. Rust trotted beside him with steady steps. Tom stopped near the fence and looked out at the land. Rust stood quietly beside him. Tom felt a deep calm in his chest. Rust was changing. The ranch was changing too. There was a sense of something growing, something meaningful. Tom did not know what the next day would bring, but he felt sure Rust would face it with courage. That night Rust slept closer to Tom's house. For the first time he rested without waking in fear. He belonged a little more each day. What Tom did not know was that Rust carried a secret that would soon reveal itself. A secret that would bring new challenges and unexpected discoveries to the ranch. Days turned into weeks, and Rust continued to settle into life on Tom's ranch. His nervous energy slowly transformed into a cautious confidence. Every morning he greeted Tom at the barn, and every evening he followed him back to the house, always keeping a careful watch on the surroundings. The ranch had become his world, and Tom's presence his anchor. One bright morning, Tom noticed Rust acting differently. The dog's ears perked up, his body tense, and his nose twitching as if he had smelled something unusual. Tom followed Rust to the far edge of the property, past the pastures and near the dry creek bed. Rust stopped and crouched low, growling softly, not at Tom, but toward something hidden among the rocks and shrubs. Tom froze, curious and cautious. He scanned the area and saw nothing unusual at first. Then he noticed small footprints near the creek. They were fresh and seemed too small to belong to a person. Tom frowned. He hadn't seen children or travelers near the ranch recently. Rust barked once, sharp and urgent, and then ran a few steps toward the creek. Tom followed slowly, keeping his hand near the rope he always carried. Rust's bark grew louder, and then the cowboy saw it, a tiny, shivering puppy hidden beneath the rocks. The puppy's coat was matted with dirt and dust, and its eyes were wide with fear. Rust approached slowly, sniffing the little creature. The puppy whimpered but did not move away. Rust gave a gentle nudge with his nose, then stepped back and looked at Tom as if asking for permission. Tom knelt beside the puppy and spoke softly. "It's okay, little one. You're safe now. The puppy hesitated but allowed him to lift it into his arms. Tom glanced at Rust. The dog's eyes were alert, almost proud. It was clear that Rust had discovered the puppy and wanted to make sure it was safe. Tom felt a surge of gratitude toward the dog. Not only had Rust learned to trust, but he was now showing compassion for another creature. Tom carried the puppy back to the barn while Rust trotted beside him, keeping close. Inside the barn, Tom set the puppy down on a clean blanket. He gave it some water and soft food. Rust sat nearby, watching every movement. The puppy hesitated at first, but the gentle presence of Rust seemed to calm it. By the end of the afternoon, the puppy had taken its first tentative steps toward Rust, sniffing him curiously. Rust lowered his head and wagged his tail slowly, welcoming the new arrival. Tom smiled. He had not expected Rust to be so patient and careful. Rust had gone from being the most feared dog in town to a protector and guide for the smallest and most vulnerable. It amazed him how much a creature could change when given love and trust. He decided to name the puppy Dust, after the soft brown earth where they had found him. Rust and Dust, 2 names, 1 bond forming already. The days that followed brought new routines. Rust and Dust were inseparable. Rust taught Dust the rules of the ranch, guiding him away from danger and showing him where it was safe to explore. Dust copied Rust's every movement, learning quickly. Tom watched this transformation with quiet satisfaction. He often thought about the auction, about the laughter of people who had once called Rust the most hated dog. He wondered if they could imagine him now, standing tall and proud beside a little companion. One morning, a messenger arrived from the town. A local farmer named Henry came with urgent news. "Tom, there's trouble," he said, worry in his voice. "There's a group of coyotes near the northern edge of the property. They've been attacking livestock at night." Tom nodded, understanding the urgency. Protecting the animals was always his priority. Rust immediately sensed the tension. He stood tall, his ears alert, and moved to Tom's side. Dust, still young but eager to learn, stayed close behind Rust. Tom led them to the northern pasture, checking the fences carefully. The sun was rising, casting long shadows across the fields. Rust sniffed the ground and listened to the soft sounds in the distance. He barked once, low and commanding, and Tom followed his lead. As they approached the edge of the pasture, Rust froze and pointed toward a small group of coyotes hidden among the trees. Their eyes glimmered in the morning light, and their teeth showed through partially open jaws. Tom's heart raced. He knew the coyotes could cause serious harm to the livestock if they were not stopped. But he also knew he had help he had never imagined would come from the dog people once feared. Rust moved forward cautiously, growling deeply but not attacking. Dust stayed close, copying Rust's every step. Tom spoke quietly, "Stay calm, Rust. Let them away." The dog understood. With careful movements, Rust ran toward the coyotes, barking to scare them. Dust followed hesitantly, learning how to react under Rust's guidance. The coyotes, surprised and cautious, backed away from the livestock and eventually disappeared into the distant woods. Tom watched, amazed at Rust's bravery and intelligence. Rust returned to him, his chest heaving, eyes shining. Dust ran to Rust's side, licking his fur in admiration. Tom knelt and stroked Rust's head. "You've done more than I ever expected," he said. Rust nuzzled him in return, proud and humble all at once. That evening, Tom sat on the porch with Rust and Dust at his feet. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. He thought about how one dog, once abandoned and hated, had transformed into a protector, a teacher, and a friend. Dust rested against Rust, exhausted from the day's adventure. Rust looked out over the fields, alert but calm, as if he understood the responsibility he now carried. Tom realized that Rust's past struggles had prepared him for this moment. The dog who had been feared and misunderstood had found his true purpose. And Tom, who had trusted the animal when no one else would, had been rewarded with a companion unlike any other. He smiled quietly to himself, thinking about how life had a way of surprising those who showed patience and kindness. That night, as Rust and Dust slept peacefully in the barn, Tom sat by the window and gazed at the stars. He wondered what the future held. He knew there would be challenges, more lessons, and perhaps more unexpected arrivals like Dust. But he also knew that together, they could face anything. Rust had proven that even the most misunderstood creature could become a hero in the right hands. And Tom felt a deep sense of gratitude for the dog who had changed his ranch, and his life, forever. Weeks passed, and life on Tom's ranch settled into a steady rhythm. Rust and Dust became inseparable. Dust grew stronger every day, learning from Rust how to explore safely, interact with the livestock, and avoid dangers in the surrounding woods. Tom marveled at how Rust, once feared by all, had become a guide and teacher. It was a transformation that warmed Tom's heart, and he knew the story of the hated dog was far from over. One crisp morning, Tom was checking the fences near the old oak grove when Rust suddenly stiffened. His ears went upright, and his body tensed as if sensing something Tom could not yet see. Dust, still young but cautious, mirrored Rust's alertness. Tom stopped and looked toward the grove. He noticed a faint movement behind the trees, a shadow among the branches. Rust barked sharply, a sound that carried urgency. Tom's curiosity and concern were both piqued. Slowly, Tom walked toward the grove, Rust and Dust following closely. As he approached, he saw the shadow move again. It was a small figure crouched on the ground, trying to stay hidden. Tom raised his hands and called gently, "It's okay. You're safe here." The figure, a boy perhaps no older than 10, peeked out nervously. His clothes were dusty and torn, and his eyes reflected fear and uncertainty. Rust lowered his head and wagged his tail slowly, a gesture of reassurance. Dust stepped forward, sniffing the boy's shoes gently. Tom crouched down to meet the child's gaze. "What's your name, son?" he asked. The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Ben." Tom nodded calmly. "Ben, you're safe now. Do you want to come with me to the barn?" Rust gave a quiet bark, almost as if encouraging Ben to trust them. Ben hesitated but followed Tom and the dogs to the barn. Rust stayed close, keeping a watchful eye, while Dust remained at Ben's side, a comforting presence for the boy. Inside, Tom offered Ben some water and a simple breakfast of bread and fruit. As the boy ate, Tom spoke softly. "Where have you been all night, Ben?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. He explained that he had wandered away from a nearby farm after becoming scared of a storm. He had been lost and alone for hours, unsure how to get home. Tom listened carefully, nodding. He knew the boy needed not only comfort but also trust and patience, just as Rust had needed. Rust lay nearby, occasionally glancing at Ben, letting him know there was no danger. Dust sniffed the boy's shoes and wagged his tail, drawing a faint smile from Ben. Tom realized how much the presence of the two dogs helped calm the child. The animals, once feared or abandoned, were now beacons of safety. After breakfast, Tom decided it was best to take Ben back to his home. Rust and Dust followed closely as they walked along the dirt road leading to the farm. Ben began to relax, holding Dust's leash gently and trusting Rust to guide them. When they arrived at the farm, Ben's parents ran out, panic written across their faces. Their relief was immediate and overwhelming. They thanked Tom profusely, their voices trembling with gratitude. Tom simply nodded and smiled, introducing them to Rust and Dust. "These two helped me find Ben," he said. "They're part of the team now." The experience left Tom thinking deeply. Rust had not only saved the puppy but had also helped reunite a lost child with his family. The most hated dog in town had become a hero in ways nobody expected. Tom realized that sometimes, the creatures who seemed the most difficult or the least lovable had the greatest capacity for courage and care. Over the next few days, Rust's reputation quietly changed in the town. Farmers and neighbors who once laughed at Tom for adopting him now approached cautiously, curious about the stories they had heard. Rust remained calm and composed, never seeking attention but always acting with purpose when needed. Dust, following Rust's lead, began showing signs of bravery and intelligence as well. Together, they became a remarkable pair on the ranch. One afternoon, while Tom was fixing a broken gate, Rust and Dust ran toward the edge of the property, barking urgently. Tom dropped his tools and followed, wondering what had triggered their alarm. As he reached the pasture, he saw a group of wild horses stuck near a deep ditch. They had been spooked by a passing storm and were now in danger. Rust positioned himself between the horses and the edge of the ditch, barking and guiding them carefully. Dust followed his lead, herding the frightened animals toward safer ground. Tom worked alongside the dogs, helping the horses find solid footing. It was a difficult task, requiring patience and careful timing. Rust remained calm but assertive, using soft barks and precise movements to direct the animals. Dust mirrored his actions, showing an impressive understanding of her role. Within an hour, all the horses were safe, and Rust and Dust stood proudly beside Tom, their tails wagging in satisfaction. Tom looked at the dogs and felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Rust, the dog who had been feared and rejected, had not only adapted to life on the ranch but had also developed leadership and courage. Dust, his young companion, had grown under Rust's guidance. Together, they were more than just pets. They were guardians of the ranch, teachers of compassion, and examples of the power of trust. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Tom sat on the porch with Rust and Dust at his feet. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. Tom reflected on the journey that had brought Rust to the ranch. From the auction yard where he had been called the most hated dog to this moment of quiet triumph and respect. The transformation had been remarkable, and it was only possible because Tom had chosen to believe in him. Rust rested his head on Tom's knee, while Dust curled beside him. They had faced storms, wild animals, and fear together. Tom knew that life on the ranch would continue to bring challenges, but he also knew that he and his two companions were ready for whatever came next. They had formed a bond that could not be broken, a bond built on trust, patience, and unwavering care. As darkness settled over the ranch, Tom felt a sense of peace. Rust and Dust slept soundly nearby, their breathing steady and calm. The world outside could be unpredictable and harsh, but here on the ranch, there was safety, warmth, and friendship. Tom whispered softly, "You've both taught me so much. I couldn't ask for better companions." Rust stirred slightly, his eyes meeting Tom's, and Dust gave a small nuzzle, as if agreeing. The night was quiet, yet full of promise. Tom knew the days ahead would hold new surprises and adventures. Rust and Dust had already proven themselves as more than just animals. They were part of the family, part of the story, and part of the heart of the ranch. And Tom, the quiet cowboy who had believed in a misunderstood dog, felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected ways life had rewarded him. The following morning, Tom woke to the sounds of birds singing and the faint rustle of the wind across the fields. Rust and Dust were already awake, alert and ready for the day. Tom stretched and smiled at his companions, feeling a strong sense of connection with the dogs that had changed his ranch, and his life, forever. After breakfast, Tom decided to take a ride on horseback through the hills beyond the ranch. Rust and Dust ran alongside, keeping pace with the horses' steady steps. The morning sun warmed the fields, and the air was fresh with the scent of wildflowers and grass. Tom enjoyed these moments of peace, knowing that each day brought new challenges but also new joys. As they approached a narrow trail along a small canyon, Rust suddenly stopped and barked sharply. Dust followed, growling softly, alert to whatever had caught Rust's attention. Tom looked carefully and noticed movement among the rocks. At first, he thought it might be a deer, but then he saw a small bundle trapped in a crevice. It was a fawn, its leg caught between two rocks. The animal struggled, frightened and in pain. Tom dismounted quickly and approached slowly, keeping his voice calm. "Easy, little one. Don't be scared," he whispered. Rust positioned himself near the fawn, his body tense but gentle, while Dust stayed on the other side. Tom examined the situation and realized he could free the fawn if he worked carefully and slowly. He lifted a rock slightly, and the fawn's leg slipped free. Rust barked once in approval, and Dust wagged her tail. The fawn stood on shaky legs and looked at Rust and Dust with wide eyes. Then it bounded safely into the trees, disappearing from sight. Tom knelt for a moment, catching his breath, and looked at Rust and Dust. "You two are incredible," he said softly. The dogs sat quietly, proud and calm. They had faced danger without hesitation, guided by instinct and training, but also by the bond they shared with Tom. Returning to the ranch, Tom reflected on the journey they had all taken together. Rust, the dog once feared and hated by everyone at the auction, had become a hero, not just to the livestock in the ranch, but to creatures in need. Dust, following Rust's example, had grown into a brave and loyal companion. Together, they had created a circle of trust and protection that extended beyond the boundaries of the ranch. That afternoon, Tom decided to host a small gathering in town. He wanted the neighbors to see Rust and Dust, not as the wild and unmanageable dogs from the auction, but as the remarkable companions they had become. People arrived, curious and cautious at first. They had heard stories of Rust saving the puppy, guiding the lost child, and helping with the coyotes and horses. Many were skeptical, expecting a difficult or aggressive dog. When Rust and Dust appeared, calm and composed, the crowd's expressions changed. Rust walked confidently beside Tom, his coat shining in the sun, his eyes steady and intelligent. Dust followed, attentive and eager, showing her youthful energy without chaos. Children approached cautiously, and Rust lowered his head, wagging his tail gently. Dust nuzzled one of the smaller children, encouraging them to feel safe. The townspeople watched in amazement as the dogs interacted calmly and kindly with everyone. One of the farmers, who had once called Rust the most hated dog in town, stepped forward. "I never thought I'd see this day," he said, his voice filled with awe. "That dog, he's changed." Tom nodded and smiled. "It's not just him. It's all about giving a second chance." Rust barked softly, almost in agreement, while Dust wagged her tail excitedly. The crowd laughed and clapped, realizing that their judgments had been wrong. The most hated dog had become a symbol of hope, patience, and transformation. As the sun began to set, Tom and the dogs returned to the ranch. Rust and Dust had completed another day of lessons, adventures, and gentle heroism. Tom sat on the porch, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. Rust lay at his feet, Dust curled beside him. The night was quiet, filled only with the soft sounds of the desert and the distant calls of owls. Tom felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The dogs had not only changed the ranch, they had changed him, too. They had taught him that fear could be replaced with trust, and hatred could be replaced with love. Several days later, Tom received a letter from the town council. They wanted to honor Rust and Dust for their bravery and service to the community. Tom felt proud but also humbled. The recognition was not for himself, it was for the courage, loyalty, and heart of two remarkable dogs. On the day of the ceremony, the town gathered in the central square. Rust and Dust stood beside Tom, calm and dignified. Children approached to pet them, and townspeople cheered as the mayor spoke of their heroism. Rust and Dust received medals for courage, and Tom felt tears prick his eyes. He looked down at the dogs, who wagged their tails and licked his hands. The journey from the auction yard to this moment had been extraordinary. Rust, the most hated dog, had proven that every creature has value, and that love and patience can create miracles. Dust, once a frightened puppy, had learned courage and loyalty from her companion. Together, they had become legends in their town, not for aggression, but for kindness, bravery, and the ability to inspire others. After the ceremony, Tom returned to the ranch with Rust and Dust. The stars were bright, and the air was calm. He walked among the fields, looking at the fences, the barn, and the open pastures. Rust ran ahead to check on the livestock, while Dust followed with playful energy. Tom realized that life was not about the challenges or the fears he faced, it was about the bonds he created and the love he shared. Rust and Dust had shown him that in ways he could never have imagined. That night, as Tom sat by the fire, Rust and Dust resting at his side, he thought back to the day he first saw Rust at the auction. The dog had been feared, abandoned, and misunderstood. Yet, with patience, trust, and care, Rust had become a loyal companion, a hero, and a teacher. Dust, too, had grown under his guidance, learning courage, loyalty, and compassion. Together, they had turned a quiet ranch into a sanctuary of bravery and love. Tom whispered softly, "You two have changed more than this ranch. You've changed hearts." Rust lifted his head and gave a soft bark, while Dust nuzzled him. The stars reflected in Rust's eyes, calm and steady. The journey had begun with fear and misunderstanding, but it ended with trust, courage, and unbreakable bonds. The most hated dog had found his place, and everyone who knew his story could see that nothing was impossible when love and patience led the way. The ranch slept peacefully that night. Rust and Dust curled up close to Tom, forming a circle of warmth and safety. The moon cast a gentle glow over the fields, illuminating a place where fear had been replaced by love, doubt by courage, and loneliness by friendship. Tom knew that the story of Rust and Dust would be told for years, a reminder to everyone that even the most rejected and misunderstood can become heroes. The adventure had started at the auction, but it would never truly end, it had only begun.